you put in those rules, and then we can run a solver that actually will peg through the entire chain that demand that we have at the ending point on the different days, and provide visibility on the supportability of that demand and the optimal distribution, manufacturing, and sourcing plans to actually support and service that demand.
Santiago Garcia Poveda Maria with O9 Solutions. Thank you for joining me. I really appreciate this.
No, thank you, Mike, for having me join you. It's a pleasure to be here with you today.
Thank you. So Santiago and I first met at NRF earlier this year. I got an introduction to O9's digital brain platform, which has been helping retailers of all sorts with their, I'd say, overall strategies and implementing them. But rather than hear me discuss something I barely know anything about, let's have Santiago talk about, if you wouldn't mind, explain a little bit more about O9 specifically, the problems you're solving, and also your role there.
Totally. So basically, Online Solutions is a leading AI-powered software as a service platform to support end-to-end planning for companies across industries. So we touch definitely retail, also consumer products, and also more complex, more industrial and supply manufacturing. And we cover all the space from merchandising, demand management, commercial management, distribution planning, manufacturing, and sourcing. And my role at O9 is to lead our global retail and fashion sales team globally. And it's a pleasure to kind of discuss a little bit the challenges that we're seeing in some of our clients and how they are actually addressing those today.
Thank you for that beautiful introduction, because really where I'd love to focus this conversation are those challenges, because I think you have a unique perspective because of the service you provide to see what the challenges are that retailers are facing and how they're going about making the decisions that will go into solving them. So let's just start with some of the challenges and the complexities that you see retailers facing right now.
Yeah, and I think the main challenge, and it's not exclusive of retailers, is that we have a extremely data-rich world today, and we have tons of data all over us. But unfortunately, I think we haven't yet found necessarily the best way to extract the most value out of it. And what we in O9 have felt that is the main reason for that is that we, despite having data-rich environments, we're still operating in traditional operating models, very siloed, disconnected, and not collaborative enough. So our motto of being and our objective is to help companies transform their operating model from traditional to digital operating models, where you can actually connect different functions over a single data model, and you can actually see the implications of a decision across the entire company, being able to also run simulations end to end and really making decisions for the better outcome of the company and not for the individual KPIs of your function. That, I think, is the most ingrained challenge that I'm seeing when people are now approaching digital transformation. And that's leading to a traditional best of breed logic to looking more for a best of suite approach that actually allows to touch on different functional areas and integrate them on what it's called integrated planning, integrated business planning, integrated retail planning.
So to be fair, there are a lot of technology providers out there that will say that their solutions help to solve those problems, because every single retailer beyond retail would agree with you that the biggest challenge right now is moving from siloed data sets and the barriers that presents to genuine insights. And I've taken a look at the solution set that O9 offers, and it's vast. What you guys have is touches on potentially every aspect of the decision-making chain across all of retail. It's vast and super impressive. But so much of those kinds of transformations go beyond the technology because, you're talking about corporate cultures that are built to protect those silos often. So I guess I'm curious, with a solution such as O9, which is so vast, so comprehensive, and is designed to break down those silos, how do you approach the cultural hurdles to implement something as extensive as what O9 is bringing to the table?
Yeah, and I think it's a great question, Mike. So it's the first thing is we are cognizant that we rarely are gonna find an enterprise grade company that it's completely um, greenfield and it's looking for all the systems at the same time and there's no legacy to actually integrate with. So the way that we architected the platform is notably thinking about the end-to-end connectivity, but designed as Lego blocks that integrate between them seamlessly. And you don't necessarily need all of them to be able to build the picture that operates for your company. So that's just one way to actually overcome the first hurdle, that is not everyone might actually be on board in the transformation. The second one is there's a big technological hurdle on how to handle data. Because every single function has their own data sources, their own data granularities, their own data hierarchies, and being able to harmonize all that and centralize it on a single data model is one of the key challenges where many technologies fail in this daunting task. We have a patented proprietary GraphCube database that actually bridges the best of the OLAP cube databases that provide the possibility of actually aggregating up and down in the hierarchies, and the graph technology that actually allows to build relationships between different objects. And through that, we have created a database that is actually extremely scalable and extremely flexible to actually be able to load those different data sources and be able to create relationships between them and create a single optimized in-memory database that actually spans different functions and allows to really visualize the data and operate on the data at the granularity that is needed for each individual user. So there is a technical element of it. And then I would say that the biggest hurdle of all, and you were touching on it, is the people aspect of it. So it's people need to have a common view of change and an aligned and coordinated effort on both the selection process as well as then operationally how to use the tool. And that actually for us is more as the part of the selection. So we are not aiming to work with a million companies in the world. We want to be strategic partners of our partners and customers, and therefore what we're looking is for people that have a vision to actually go into a journey of transformation, and they are really at the ambition level and the engagement of the top management to actually go after something that is transformative. And that's the people that we will work with. And it's not always from the beginning on an end-to-end transformation. We often maybe start with one use cases, but we are actually have an understanding that the vision that the company is operating on, it's going in that direction of a digital operating model and leveraging data and technology in a different way for making better decisions.
Picture your organization as a solitary island amidst a vast, churning sea of opportunities. On the horizon lie other islands, relationships waiting to be built, partnerships waiting to be formed. But between your island and those distant shores stretches a turbulent expanse filled with uncertainty and risk. You're going to need a bridge, or bridges, plural, to span this divide, connecting you to new horizons. Those bridges are strategic partnerships. Yet, building bridges and partnerships is no simple task. They both require careful planning, precise engineering, and a deep understanding of the terrain. Missteps can lead to collapse, leaving your business stranded on its island. Tectonic builds strategic partnerships, helping organizations navigate the treacherous waters, ensuring that those bridges are strong and resilient and scalable. There's a reason why some of the largest, most progressive companies in the world are retooling their revenue models and investing in partnerships. Find out more at tectonic.co. That's TECTONIQ.co. Would it be fair to say that the way O9 approaches these kinds of new client engagements, that you've got a graph database application that can be plugged into from any source and layered on top of the organization to the point where other functions and use cases can then be plugged into that same database over time and the same functionality, or am I misreading that?
No, I think you're reading that correctly. It's a very flexible architecture where we can plug in data from other sources, and eventually we will be able to also bring new functionalities on our platform. And to that point, it's also a very open platform. The entire analytics layer is an open architecture layer, so that our algorithms are not a black box like many other solutions are. We believe that if there's one thing that I think we can all be certain of, is that the world in 5 years will look nothing like the world looks today. So trying to solve for today's problem will definitely not provide a solution from problems 5 years from now. And we hope that all customers will be looking at future-proofing their technology decisions. And for us, providing an open analytics layer, it's part of that. We see a growing trend of companies having their own data science teams and growing their own proprietary IP on that space. And we want to enable a platform that can provide that out of the box if customers want, but they can also eventually develop their own IP on the platform.
You mentioned earlier on that the starting point for working with O9 solutions could be any one of a number of use cases. What would I don't know if this is even a fair question, but what is the most common starting point? Or would you say, how, if you're a retailer and you're thinking it's time to accelerate my digital transformation, I've got to start thinking in a more integrated way, where would be the first place to apply O9's kinds of solutions?
Yeah, it's a good question, Mike. I always say it depends, and it's a terrible answer, but there it's
It's okay.
there is no really one place where is the best place to start. It really is dependent on the company's needs, what's their starting situation, their current technological landscape, and their strategic priorities. To be honest, with many customers, the way that I tend to try to identify that best place to start, and it might sound like a joke, but it is not, is to ask, where do you have the most Excel files or the biggest and more complex Excel files? That's the place that you actually have the direst need for a technology to help you manage that process better. And that might be a fair number of places. So we are seeing a lot of traction on supplier collaboration, which might seem like an area that is not inside the realm of your four walls, but we constantly keep sending Excels over email to our suppliers, having no visibility, losing time back and forth. That's one space where, and it's not probably where we would be starting usually transformations 1 year from now, but we're seeing a lot of traction there now. If you want a quicker return to value because you need to fund the rest of your transformation, usually going onto the operational horizon is the one that provides, I would say, a faster ROI because you immediately impact on the bottom line. So you have a lot of people looking at forecasting, replenishment, and supply chain constraints. So it truly depends on what is the challenges that each company is facing at that moment in time.
You mentioned supply chain. We'd be remiss if we didn't start talking about it because I know that's a big part of what O9 is solving for. But let's talk about the specific issues that O9 is addressing, and because those are clearly hot buttons with a lot of people right now, and how O9 is solving for those.
Yeah. So basically, in the end, it's online digital brain platform that you were referring to before. It operates on a digital twin of the entire value chain. So we can with that proprietary graph cube that I was mentioning, we're able to represent the full value chain, including all the nodes of your supply chain, stores, distribution centers, manufacturing sites, suppliers, and all the connections between them. So you have your primary kind of distribution lanes, any alternative lanes that you have available, the lead times that those different distribution steps or manufacturing steps or processing steps take, the capacities of each one of those nodes and steps in terms of storage, loading, personnel, whatever kind of capacity constraints we can load, and the costs of every single one of those steps. And now even the CO2 emissions associated to every single one of those steps. When you are able to load all that information on a supply chain digital twin, then you can run solvers that allow you to having a view of demand and having a prioritization of what demand is most relevant for the customer, whatever it is, highest margin, flagship stores, a certain channel, customers with a higher SLA, whatever it is that is relevant for you, then and adding the planning policies, what's your inventory levels, your SLAs, your allowance to actually pre-build the stock or postpone and or deliver late, or your product substitution availability. And then we can run a solver that actually will peg through the entire chain that demand that we have at the ending point on the different days and provide visibility on the supportability of that demand and the optimal distribution, manufacturing, and sourcing plans to actually support and service that demand. That's the main concept behind our supply chain solution. And that's how we support distribution challenges, manufacturing challenges, or sourcing challenges.
Interesting, the phrase you just used. I talk to retail technology providers, at technology providers from all across the horizon here often, many of whom are facing supply chain hurdles. But the concept, the phrase you just used, I think is really an interesting one, the supply chain digital twin idea, which there are other technologies out there that are kind of doing that, but I think somehow that phrase starts to bring some clarity into what you could actually do here. So one, I think you should keep using that phrase because it's a really good one. But I can't think of anyone else. I could be missing somebody, but I can't think of anyone else who's kind of presenting their framework in that way. And to be able to deploy solvers, as you call them, in different scenarios that can identify pain points, breakages, cost inefficiencies, and those kinds of things seems invaluable. And I know there are lots of other platforms that do those kinds of things, but they don't tend to present it in a kind of a digital twin perspective. And I think that's really interesting. I don't know if that's part of the core of how you see this platform, or if that's just a phrase you came up with just now, but I think it's pretty good.
No. It's definitely it's instrumental to Online's concept. I cannot take the credit for that sentence. It's definitely something that our founders have had in mind since the beginning of Online. And I think it's truly differential on the way that we think about operational decisions for retail. It's in fact most of the market, for example, thinking about operational decisions like forecasting and replenishment. It's actually pretty much unconstrained. It's very difficult to load on that replenishment logic all the upstream constraints of your supply chain, of the capacity of the employees that you have on the warehouse, the lead times, the truck availability, the adding all that into the replenishment. It's a complexity layer that not everyone is including on their existing solutions. And one of our biggest customer actually in North America, it's a very big retailer there that had actually tried to add that layer of constraining the replenishment for a very long time and struggled with many technologies because of the volume of data, the need of those solvers to be really performant, and the scalability requirements. And what we actually were able to build with them is building those full level of complexity with all the constraints and running the replenishment, being able to make decisions real time of 3 days from now, you're going to have a peak that will actually you will not be able to service. So we need to make decisions. Do we actually pre-build that stock? Do we postpone something else and run with a lower safety stock level for that week because it's something that is less important? How do we prioritize what is important? Or do we actually invest in additional supply chain capacity for that week so that we are able to service that specific peak? It always happens before Christmas, before
Sure.
Labor Day, before kind of any of those moments. And kind of handling that operationally linked with the supply chain perspective, I think it just enhanced that value. And that's the concept of integrating the commercial forecasting and replenishment distribution decision with the upper distribution view of the supply chain.
I'm just curious, with that large retailer you mentioned, how long did it take to go from zero to that level of integration where you could pull off that kind of analysis? I mean, was it just a serious, like a plug and play, we'll hook up to your APIs and we're ready to go? I can't imagine that being the case, especially with a large retailer. But, I think it could be instructive for people listening to this, what's involved in having that kind of operability.
Yeah. And the key challenge in this case was that the constraints on every node of the supply chain is not something that is available on any database that you say, let me just load them. So we
Right.
actually had to work with them to go identify what's the capacity that we have on every single DC. We actually started trying to model everything from personnel to forklifts to picking space to packing to storage on every single DC on their network. Very soon they realized that the main constraint was personnel and loading base. And we actually went into modeling those and not modeling the rest. And in 7 months, the plan was 6. We actually took 7 to get live with that customer and with that solution, with those limitations of actually not loading every single constraint, but loading just personnel and base. And
With that level of granularity that you mentioned earlier,
yep, yeah.
that's
So
remarkable. I mean,
it,
that's just remarkable to get that kind of complexity done in that period of time from scratch.
Yeah. No, that definitely was it was a big kind of challenge that we faced, and we were able to actually deliver in time.
Yeah, that's massive. Just to preserve my credibility, we have to address AI. But I'd love to know how how O9 is viewing AI, how you're deploying it. I would imagine it's a, core feature set of some of the ways you're gathering and analyzing data. But let's hear from you. Because everybody wants to know.
Yeah. It's the talk of the minute. So definitely, I mean, AI to start with is a very broad field. So it's AI is central to the platform. Machine learning is part of AI, and that's how we run forecasting in its majority. So basically, we have many AI use cases already plugged into the platform for years now. And when I say that we have an open analytics layer where we can run data science and machine learning algorithms, that's an AI layer that is open source right there. I guess that when you're asking about what we're thinking about AI today, we're thinking more about generative AI and large language models and what's now coming. And I think there are a couple elements here that are critical to us. The first thing is for us, one of the key, I would say, one of the key changes that we believe that AI is going to bring to planning is that it's still around 80% of the knowledge on a company that it's really important for planning is tribal knowledge on the minds of the planners. And that is something that with this kind of large language models being able to process and structure data, we believe that over the next years, it's going to become the opposite. It's going to be 80% of it is going to be available and digitized, and it will be a minority that is tribal knowledge. And that will fundamentally change the way that planning occurs in companies, to the point where eventually we might be talking that companies are not competing on the street, like on the storefront, but on the power of their knowledge models that they have actually been able to build for their AI to be able to drive decisions. So we think that it's definitely central to everything that it's going to happen in the next few years in the planning space. The first steps that we've taken is to look at where can we add value today to our planning lifecycle with AI. And we identify several areas. I would say, highlighting a few of them. I think one of them is on the configuration of the platform. Sorry. So basically, when we are deploying the platform and we're saying it takes 7 months, it takes 7 months because we still need to process data. You need to transform it, you need to load it, you need to structure it, make sense out of it. The minute that you can actually configure the platform through Gen AI, saying, hey, take this database, load it into the platform, merge it with this one, and create whatever it is that we need to try to do, or add an approve button that will actually jump to the senior manager and it will require this type of approval. And we are developing those type of configuration steps that are not traditionally human to machine interface, but more text driven. And we believe that can be a game changer on the time it takes to deploy these tools, and thinking on the value that it's on the table in many of these transformation, accelerating the time to value by 50% would drive an amazing amount of value. The second one would be actually on the interface between planners and the tool, to the human to machine interface. Today is still very mouse driven and navigating through it and seeing the dashboards. But we see a world in which this will be text to machine or voice to text to machine in a way, where we will be able to say, and we already have pilots ongoing with several customers on being able to say, run a scenario with a 10% increase of demand and tell me what's going to happen to my supply. And it automatically spits out, well, you will have a problem in these products, in these locations, in this, and then and how can I solve it? Would you be able to suggest any ways that we can resolve that? Say, well, if you actually bring this product by air and substitute this with this and allow this to be shipped from this location to this other store, you can actually solve 80% of the problems. There is these other 3 items that you don't really have an easy resolution for. And that will, again, fundamentally transform the job of a planner in the way that the time it takes to really run scenarios and interpret the scenarios and be able to take decisions.
Can you even imagine a world where that could happen? So last question, and you kind of alluded to it a minute ago, but on a more personal level, what is the most interesting thing you've ever experienced with ChatGPT?
That's a very good one. There are many. I don't know if I have a good enough interesting answer on this one. You hadn't sent me this one in advance to think about.
No. That's okay. I asked somebody this question the other day, and they said, "I can't tell you that. It's really good, but I can't say it in public." So that's fine too.
I would actually love that one. I could have come up with that one. No, I would say one of the most interesting things that I actually did, I asked ChatGPT to organize me a tour of 3 days on my hometown, of where to go, what to see, and where to eat. And after many years living in my hometown, I actually was discovered a couple of very nice spots that I now
Really?
can recommend to my friends. And
Amazing.
it's completely things that I would have never thought about. And I wasn't expecting to be surprised by the output of that of a 3-day recommendation itinerary.
Amazing. All right. That one will go on the record as a good one. Well, good. Santiago Garcia Poveda Maria, thank you so much for the time, the discussion, your ideas, the way that you and O9 Solutions are looking into the future and trying to bring it to the here and now. I really appreciate this, and I'm looking forward to the time that we can do this again.
Definitely. Anytime you want, Mike. It was a pleasure.